welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie and I appreciate y'all stopping by. Today I'll be showing how I made these 15 fun and easy fall themed DIYs that are perfect for a fall themed tiered tray. Stay tuned to the end of this video to see how I styled all these projects on my tray. I hope y'all enjoy the video, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's go ahead and jump into DIY number 1. For this project, I used one of these wooden pallet pumpkins from Dollar Tree. I started by removing the hanger and used some spackling from Dollar Tree to fill in the holes at the top of the pumpkin. Next, I used this burnt orange fabric from Dollar Tree. I applied an even layer of Mod Podge onto the slats of the pumpkin and placed the fabric on top, smoothing out all the lumps and wrinkles. Once the fabric was adhered to the pumpkin, I applied another layer of Mod Podge on the top of the fabric and set it aside to fully dry for a couple of hours. After the pumpkin was completely dry, I took a sharp X-Acto knife and cut along the slits of the pumpkin to remove the excess fabric. Next, I took a finger sander and sanded around all the edges to remove the excess fabric so that the pumpkin had nice, clean, finished edges. I then took 3 of these wooden cubes from Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach them to the back side of the pumpkin at the bottom so that it stands on its own, and this one is finished. Moving right along to DIY number 2. For this project, I used this 2-pack of foam dice from Dollar Tree. First, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and gave both dice 3 coats. Then I used apple barrel paint in the color toasted marshmallow and gave both dice 1 coat. Next, I roughly sketched out a male scarecrow face on one of the die and a female scarecrow face on the other. I used a fine tip black marker to fill in the eyes and the rest of the facial features of both scarecrows. I then used a fine tip orange marker to fill in the nose of both scarecrows. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White to fill in the white parts of the scarecrow's eyes. I used long pieces of raffia as the hair on the female scarecrow and used hot glue to secure it in place. Once I had all the raffia glued into place, I took some scissors and trimmed up the sides so that the die would sit flat on the tray. Next, I took some of this orange fall ribbon from Dollar Tree and tied a simple bow and used hot glue to attach it to the top of the scarecrow's head, then dovetailed the ends, and this little scarecrow is finished. For the male scarecrow, I hot glued some shorter pieces of raffia to the top of the die for hair. I then used one of these mini scarecrow hats from Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach it to the top of the scarecrow, and this little guy is finished. I think this set of scarecrows turned out absolutely adorable. Let's jump on into DIY number 3. For this project, I used one of these hexagon wood shapes from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and gave it 1 good coat. Next, I used this sheet of fall rub-on transfers also from Dollar Tree. I placed the transfer sheet onto the wood hexagon and used a burnishing tool to transfer the image over onto the wood. Here you can see that once the image has been transferred, it becomes cloudy looking on the actual plastic sheet. Once I had all the images transferred, I removed the transfer sheet. Then, to finish up this quick little project, I took a sander and sanded around the edges of the hexagon to remove any pieces of the transfer that was hanging over the edges. This can be used as either a sign or a riser on a tiered tray. Quickly moving on to DIY number 4. For this project, I used this small wooden plaque from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and gave the entire plaque 1 good coat. Next, I used one of these gorgeous watercolor napkins also from Dollar Tree. I started by cutting off 1 square of the napkin and removing the back ply. Next, I used a school glue stick to adhere the napkin to the front of the plaque and set it aside to allow the glue to dry. Once the glue was completely dry, I placed a layer of Mod Podge over the top of the napkin in the center of the plaque and set it aside to dry for a couple of hours. Once the plaque was dry, I took a finger sander and sanded around the edges of the plaque to remove the excess napkin and so that it had a nice finished edge. I also went ahead and sanded around the edges of the plaque to distress them a little so that the natural wood would show through the paint. Next, I used this wooden Hello Fall word cutout from this pack of Harvest DIY words from Dollar Tree. I wanted to leave it the natural wood color, so I just used some hot glue to secure it to the center of the plaque. Then to finish this one up, I painted a tumbling tower block from Dollar Tree with Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and used hot glue to attach it to the back of the plaque at the bottom so that it stands on its own. On to DIY number 5. For this project, I used 10 of these wooden cubes from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin and gave all the cubes one coat. Once the paint was dry, I took a finger sander and sanded around all the edges of the cubes to distress them. Next, I used one of these wooden skewer sticks. I measured out about how long I wanted the stem of the pumpkin to be, then cut off a piece of the skewer. I wanted one edge of the stem to be somewhat flat, so I used some pliers to hold the skewer piece and sanded it on a sanding sponge. I then repeated these steps until I had 7 stems. I did make some longer than others so that they would look more natural. I used apple barrel paint in the color brown oxide to paint all the stems with one coat. Next, I used these lowercase alphabet stickers from Hobby Lobby to spell out the words "Hey Pumpkin" on the cubes. Then I used hot glue to attach the cubes that spell out the word "Hey" together. I also went ahead and used hot glue to attach all of the cubes that spell out the word "pumpkin" together. Next, I used hot glue to attach the cubes that say "Hey" in the middle of the top of the cubes that say "pumpkin." Then, using pliers to hold the stems, I used hot glue to attach one to the top of each of the 7 pumpkins. To finish off this project, I attached some Spanish moss around each of the stems using hot glue to secure it in place. I then trimmed up the moss so that it was nice and neat, and this one is finished. Let's move on to DIY number 6. For this project, I used 3 of these oval wood slices from Dollar Tree that were roughly the same size. I placed hot glue along the back edges of one of the slices and placed it down on top of the other 2, making sure they were all facing the same direction and flush at the bottom. Next, I used one of these long wood slices from Dollar Tree. I placed a line of hot glue along the back side of the 3 slices between the 2 bottom pieces, then placed the long wood slice to create the pumpkin stem, and this one is done. I did go ahead and create another pumpkin using the wood slices that were just a bit larger. I think these little pumpkins turned out absolutely adorable. If y'all don't mind, I would like to take a second to talk about today's video. It's part of the Signs of Fall playlist hosted by Amanda from 6 Kids and a Glue Gun, Chantel from Crafty Hints, and Brenda from Rustic and Lace DIY. I know I've talked about these amazing ladies before, but seriously, they are some of the kindest, most amazing creators that I've met on my YouTube journey. They are all 3 incredibly talented, so if you haven't checked out their channels, I highly recommend you do so. You're not going to be disappointed. I'll link their channels in the description box below, as well as leave a link to the playlist so you can head over there and check it out once you're finished with my video. With that said, let's move on to DIY number 7. For this project, I used one of these chunky wooden eggs from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and gave the entire egg one coat. I roughly sketched out some eyes and a beak onto the egg in pencil. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White to paint the white parts of the eyes. I then used Waverly chalk paint in the color Pumpkin to paint the beak. Then I used a finger sander to distress around the edges of the egg. This is how the crow looks so far. Next, I used one of these black feathers that I had in my stash and cut off the very top of the feather. I then used hot glue to attach the feather to the top of the crow's head. Then to finish off this project, I painted one of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree with Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and used hot glue to attach it to the back of the crow at the bottom so that it would stand on its own. I think this little guy turned out super cute, although my son seems to think it looks more like a penguin than a crow. On to DIY number 8. For this project, I used one package of these wooden acorns from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color hazelnut to paint the bottom half of the acorns. Then I used Waverly chalk paint in the color truffle to paint the acorn caps. Next, I used one of these small baskets that I had in my stash. I filled up the bottom half of the basket with some hay and placed the acorns inside. Next, I used one of these chunky squirrel cutouts that I had in my stash and painted it with 2 coats of folk art paint in the color Pueblo. Then, to finish up this project, I placed some hot glue on the back side of the squirrel and attached it to the handle and on the side of the basket. Moving right along to DIY number 9. For this project, I used a small scrap piece of wood and a 1/4-inch wooden dowel from Dollar General. I started by cutting a piece of the dowel that was 4.5 inches long. I used Minwax wood finish in the color red oak to stain the piece of wood and the dowel. Once the stain was dry, I took a small piece of floral foam and hot glued it to the center of the wood base. Next, I used the scarecrow with the green hat from this 2-pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I used hot glue to attach the wooden dowel to the back of the scarecrow. Once I had the dowel glued onto the scarecrow, I placed it down in the middle of the floral foam. I used Spanish moss from Dollar Tree and hot glue to completely cover the foam. After I had the floral foam completely covered, I took some scissors and trimmed up the excess moss so that it was nice and neat. Then, to decorate the base, I used some of these natural dried puka pods that I had in my stash. I used hot glue to attach one of the larger pods to the left side of the scarecrow and then a medium pod on top of that. I then used hot glue to attach 3 of the smaller pods to the right side of the scarecrow, and this one is finished. Up next, DIY number 10. For this project, I used a string of these LED lights from Dollar Tree, as well as 10 of these mini leaves from this fall confetti pack from Hobby Lobby. I decided on a pattern for the garland and used small dabs of hot glue on the backs of the leaves and placed 1 leaf right above each one of the lights. I love how this little garland turned out. It was super simple and quick to make and adds a nice fall ambience to my tiered tray. Quickly moving on to DIY number 11. For this project, I used one of these 4-inch grapevine wreaths that I had in my stash and some of this reindeer moss from Dollar Tree. I started by using some hot glue to attach the reindeer moss around the front and back of one side of the grapevine wreath. I did go back with some scissors and trim up the excess moss so that it looks nice and neat. Then, to finish up this project, I took some of these natural dried puka pods and used hot glue to attach them to the wreath in the reindeer moss so that it somewhat resembled a pumpkin patch. I absolutely love this mini wreath. It is by far my favorite project out of all of today's DIYs. On to DIY number 12. For this project, I used one of these small wooden crates from Dollar Tree and a 1/4-inch wooden dowel from Dollar General. I cut a piece of the dowel rod that was 2.5 inches long and a piece that was 1/2 inch long. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster to paint the crate and the dowel pieces. I also used 4 of these little wooden wheels that I had in my stash. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and gave all 4 wheels 1 good coat. Next, I used the uppercase letters from this alphabet sticker sheet to spell out the words pumpkins and the numbers to put 25 cents on the front of the wooden crate. Once the wheels were dry, I used hot glue to attach them to the bottom of the crate. To put the wagon handle together, I used hot glue on one end of the longer dowel and placed the small dowel sideways against it. Then, to attach it to the crate, I put a generous amount of hot glue on the other end of the dowel and held it against the side of the crate until it set up. To finish off this one, I put some hay in the bottom of the wagon and placed some orange and white velvet pumpkins on top. Moving right along to DIY number 13. For this project, I used one of these square wooden planks and 2 of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and painted the plank and tumbling tower blocks with 1 good coat. Next, I traced out the phrase sweater weather onto a piece of regular printer paper and colored in the back side of the paper with a pencil to create a transfer. I then transferred the phrase onto the wooden plank. I took a fine tip black Sharpie and filled in the phrase. Next, I used some of these mini wooden leaves from this pack I got on sale at Hobby Lobby. I arranged 9 of the leaves on the sign around the phrase and used hot glue to secure them in place. Then, to finish up this sign, I used hot glue to attach the 2 tumbling tower blocks to the back of the sign at the bottom so that it would stand on its own. Let's jump on into DIY number 14. For this project, I used one of these long wood planks from Dollar Tree. I started by using Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and painted the entire plank with one good coat. I also used this wooden pumpkin patch word cutout that I found in my stash. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin to paint the front and sides of the words with one good coat. Next, I used 2 of these 1/4-inch Popular Square dowels. I cut the 2 dowels down so that they would fit on each long side of the wooden plank. I used Minwax wood finish in the color red oak to stain both dowels. Once everything was dry, I used hot glue to attach the words pumpkin patch to the center of the wooden plank. I also used hot glue to attach one of the dowels to each long end of the plank to create a sort of frame and so that the sign will stand on its own. Then to finish up this quick little sign, I used some of these 3D pumpkin stickers from Dollar Tree. I placed the sticker with the large orange pumpkin and the 2 small 3D pumpkins on the right side of the sign at the bottom. I did go ahead and flip the sign over and cut off any of the sticker that was sticking over the edge. Next, I placed one of the large 3D white pumpkins and one of the small white pumpkins on the bottom left side of the sign, and this one is finished. And last but not least, DIY number 15. For this project, I used one of these mini burlap sacks that I had in my stash and started by removing the jute bow and excess glue. Next, I took some polyfill from an old pillow and stuffed the sack until I was happy with the fullness. I then tied the 2 drawstrings on the bag in a double knot and cut off the excess string. I used some of this orange fall ribbon from Dollar Tree and tied it in a bow around the top of the burlap sack, making sure the knot from the drawstrings was completely covered by the bow. Once I was happy with the way the bow looked, I dovetailed the ends. Next, I used one of these brown paper tags that I had in my stash. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White and gave the tag one light coat, letting some of the brown still show through. I then used a fine-tipped Sharpie to haphazardly write the words pumpkin seeds on the tag. To finish up this quick little project, I used a piece of jute cord and placed it through the hole on the top of the tag and fed the tails back through the loop to attach it to the tag. I then cut the jute down to size and used hot glue to attach the tag to the left side of the bag just underneath the bow, and this cute little bag of pumpkin seeds is finished. Here is one final look at all of today's fall-themed DIYs displayed on my tiered tray. I absolutely love how all these DIYs came together to create a fun and festive fall display. Which one of these projects is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. I had a hard time picking just one, but I think I'm going to have to say it's the grapevine wreath. Please don't forget to go check out the link to the Signs of Fall playlist in the description box below for even more fun fall decor inspiration. Also, don't forget to go check out the channels of today's 3 wonderful hosts. Those links will be in the description box as well. I want to thank each and every one of you for stopping by, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up as it really does help me out here on YouTube. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button and stick around for a while. I have tons of fun projects on the way. I'll see y'all next time.